Hey everybody, welcome to another E100 Platoon replay. We have once again ended up on Erlenberg, so I was in fact right last video when I said that this was the next match following on from the previous one. We landed this map twice in a row. However, we're on the opposite spawn, the southeast spawn, and in this case the enemy team composition would suggest strongly that pushing the west side not going to work real well. So we decided to go with a standard anti-clockwise push. All three of us will be heading up the east side of the map and trying to cross the north bridge and get into the enemy cap. This leaves the responsibility for breaking through in the south, or holding the south rather, to our other heavies who are only too eager to go across, and the pattern. Keep an eye on him because this will become a bit of an issue later. The enemy, about half their team know what they're doing, half their team probably don't know what game they're playing. Their E50M is the best player nominally, but they've also got a decent Fatten player and 140 who I will be wanting to watch out for. Right away they lose an Indian Panzer who drowns himself. Good job. I was joking around, he says. Now at this point in TeamSpeak I came back with, well, that joke fell dead. And Ren0 decided that one was good enough to put into chat and got a bit of laugh out of the pubbies out of it. I didn't think it was good enough to put into chat, but you know, obviously it was good enough for pubbies. The enemy team is spotted doing a pretty hard push down the west side. They've got the M103 and T57 spearheading it, with more tanks in support further back. Now they do have a Waffenträger E100 and an FV215 183, so I don't really fancy the chances of those guys in the south from our team. Our E75 is either a bot or just really stupid, hasn't left our own spawn yet. And of course, being E100s, it's taken us quite a while to move up this flank, and sure enough, the enemy is really pushing that west side. Not surprising, that's the standard strat for this map. Our team should have been expecting it. Now, if you look at the positioning of our pattern, it's inevitable he's going to go down very soon. Speaking of patterns, the enemy M48 Fatten gets lit in front of me. And although I don't have a shot yet, I begin looking for one if he happens to pull out of cover. Now the enemy do have some arty, but it's not particularly heavy arty, so I'm not too worried about it. And sure enough, the west is totally broken, and our teammates are getting overwhelmed. Now I do take a bounce there. Not sure what it was, but whatever it was, it bounced. And here I have a chance at popping the Fatten. I make a quick shot into his turret face. It thankfully misses his gun mantlet and hits him in the relatively thin armor next to it, and then he backs up in a panic straight over the riverbank. Glub, glub, glub. And he was meant to be one of the better players on their team. I see a chance here to hit the JT through this tiny little gap, and I do so. So a lot of hit points gone from him. Jesus fucking Christ, cap already, says our M46. Yeah, not that simple, but that's easy for somebody to say who went south and died after firing his gun like 3 times. You can see they all rolled west. And this guy is a serial baddie. I run into him all the time, and he's always got a loudmouthed opinion on what to do to win the game, and he's always wrong. Incidentally, he's usually one of the first to die as well. So while he desperately tries to get us to cap fast, thinking that will somehow win us the game when the enemy have a 215B and a fucking Waffenträger E100, not to mention Artie watching their base, and the 140 now returning to defend it, we begin to entrench ourselves for what is bound to be a desperate fight for survival. 5 top tanks afraid of 1 TD, says the pattern, who is dead and didn't contribute anything to the match. In fact, we're not afraid of 1 TD, we're afraid of 2 TDs, 3 medium tanks, a heavy tank, a T57 heavy that may be turning around, and an arty. Because unlike him, we actually know the limits of our tanks, and we know that even with 3 E100s, we're not going to safely be able to push into that and sit on cap. It's just fucking retarded. It's absurd to expect any tank in the game to be able to push onto the enemy cap in this situation. If you look at the minimap, it's so heavily defended, it's not funny. This is what happens when trash platoons in E100s, says one of the worst players on our team. I will never tire of that. I'm able to put a shot into the 183 there, and I begin looking for a second, but he doesn't want it, and he pulls back into cover. Our 140 goes down. Our team's rapidly melting around us. I do get the finisher into the 59 there, quick snapshot, but it's looking pretty clear to me that it's going to be our platoon versus the world in a moment here. So, like I said, we start to entrench ourselves. I find myself a side scrape and dig into it and try and get shots at whatever comes towards me first. I'm hoping that the Waffenträger will be forced to push on me. The enemy just lost their 183 a moment ago, so there's that. Sure enough, there's the Waffenträger. He's not giving me a real easy shot because his hull's partially masking his turret, and it looks there like I got an unfortunate heat bounce. It happens. But in any case, he hasn't put any damage into me yet, so I've got that going for me. And I pop back out to see if I can spot him again, but it seems he's withdrawn into cover. Now, we're kind of split up. Serb is down south. He can't really move because the T-57 and M103 are able to focus him. Ren is bottled up about halfway between us, and the 53-55 is trying to hide in town as the enemy now control the entire east side of the map as well as the entire west side of the river. They have a light tank up on C0 spotting from the hilltop, and they have an IS-3 on the ridgeline at F9 delivering supporting fire. In TeamSpeak, I was asking them how their hit points were going. Obviously I didn't want to turn and look behind me while I was under threat of a Waffenträger pushing on me. Ren's able to handle the IS-3. Looks like Serb's got the T-57 tied down, so I just need to deal with my own corner and let them deal with theirs. The 103 pushes and loses a huge chunk of hit points without doing any damage to me. I sit tight. He looks like he's getting anxious to come around the corner. If that guy had pushed, he could have shot me in the side and pulled back into cover before I reloaded, but because he's a shit puppy, one of the shittier puppies on the other team, he doesn't know it takes my gun that long to reload. So he lets me fully reload and then come out and pop him. It's terrible play, absolutely terrible play. If you get hit by a high alpha gun, high damage gun, charge whatever shot it immediately and kill it. Unless it's an autoloader. If it's not an autoloader, you usually have about 10 or 15 seconds to get in, hit it, and then run away. Do not let it reload. Unfortunately for me, my shot only tracks the E50M, it doesn't actually damage him, and the Waffenträger finishes off Ren 0. Serb's still down south. There's no chance of us getting to each other, there's just too many buildings in the way, and the enemy control pretty much all the ground around and between us. I throw out a blind shot hoping for a hit on the E50M, but obviously he's repaired and moved on. Now I know that in a moment I'm going to be surrounded. Serb is very low on hit points. I'm still full, but that's not going to last long against several enemy tanks at once, all coming from different directions. I have a chance here at the 140. Unfortunately not enough damage to kill him, though it is a slight high roll. And I'm now getting hit from my left, so I try and work my position a bit. The E50M is now crossing to deal with Serb. I would love dearly to hit him, but I don't have a clear shot. Serb gets in one final hit on him before going down, and now the Wheezy 131 charges at me. Terrible shot on my part, right there. And now I make the mistake of letting the Wheezy 131 actually close distance to me without getting hit. He's now so close that I can hit him, but by the time I reload, he will have had a chance to get back into cover. Sure enough, there goes the hit, low roll. He avoids getting goal lead on my front plate and then runs around my side. Thankfully for me, he does kind of sit around the open and isn't able to pen me, but now the E50 has actually caught me up and is on my left. He's firing heat, so he zero damages my left side. The skirt eats it. I finish the EZ-131 with a lucky snapshot, and then refocus on the E50M, who has learned not to shoot heat from his tier 10 medium, finally, and actually does pen me. The Artie's now in on it as well. I push up to try and side scrape against the E50, but this is pretty much done and dusted. Even if the Waffenträger doesn't push on me, I've got him and the 140 to deal with. I make a terribly aimed shot there at the 140, and now the E50 can roll out with impunity. Now he's going to get up in my face. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second there. Now when he is up in my face, I should nominally have the advantage, because he's not going to be able to hit my lower plate, whereas I can smack him through the front of his turret, like I did just there. But unfortunately I lost my loader, and it was the 8 key I had to press, not the 7 key. I tried to heal my loader 3 times before I realised I was healing the wrong loader. And that didn't really help. Undoubtedly I would have gone down there anyway, but I could have at least maybe finished the E50M, or at least the 140. But our platoon put up the best defense we could really be asked for there. We did everything we could to stall the enemy as long as possible. The unfortunate fact is just that our team melted without doing anything at all, and so we were forced to knock off the bulk of the enemy hit points as they charged in to finish us off. And our loudmouth Patton did in fact fuck all, as usual. So for the guy saying this is what happens when trash platoons E100s, okay. Either way, I'm not going to complain too much about a 6,000 damage game, especially after the run of wins we've been having in this platoon. I was having too much fun to really give a shit about losses, and in fact, by the time this platoon was done, we'd gone from about 20% win rate before playing the E100s to about 60 or 70 after playing the E100s, so it really turned things around. Big lesson to take away from this one, I suppose, is first of all, it doesn't really matter how good you are at holding a flank if you've lost most of your team anyway, because it lets the enemy just basically surround you and take you apart. And this is what I've said before. If you're dealing with a team of better players, the best strategy isn't to attack them, it's to attack everyone else. Because once their team is gone, they will be forced to defend against superior numbers, and they won't be able to do it. Another takeaway from this, obviously, is shoot things while they're reloading. That M103 colossally fucked up, threw his tank away by not shooting me while I was reloading. He could have got at least 1 shot in there, probably 2, and he wouldn't have bounced because he would have been able to drive right alongside me and hit me. But again, he was one of the worst players in the match, so it's not surprising he was too stupid to push me while I was reloading. Third and final lesson, I suppose, is don't shoot heat in tier 10 mediums, unless you're fighting a Jagdpanzer E100 or an E3 frontally, and even then you don't really need it, unless they're hull down. By shooting heat, that E50M cost himself a penning shot. On my side, if that was an APCR round, it would have gone clean through me. It would have had no trouble. The track skirts will not stop 270 pen APCR, they will stop 330, 340 pen heat, whatever pen heat he gets. It will not get through the 100's track skirts and tracks. If he'd hit me a bit higher up on my turret, he would have penned, but he obviously didn't have the presence of mind to hit my turret. He decided to aim at my hull. If you're going to use heat or HE, you need to be mindful of where you're aiming. You can't just load gold and assume it absolves you from having to aim. I've actually had matches where pubbies have said, I was firing gold, I shouldn't have to aim. Actually, yes, you should, particularly if it's a heat round. It gives you extra pen against flat plate. It does not, however, mean you're guaranteed to pen. If you hit spaced armor, heavily angled armor, or tracks, or external modules, heat is useless. You may as well be shooting HE, because at least that will do damage. Now, having said that, don't shoot HE, but basically my point is, you're not doing anything by bouncing heat rounds off of stuff. Generally, when I'm in tanks that are sort of seen as being heat mandatory, say the T54 or the T69, I don't shoot heat most of the time. Majority of the time I'll be firing AP. I only switch to heat if I'm facing something I know I can't pen frontally. But because heat is situational and because you have to actually be careful where you're aiming it, perhaps more so than with AP, I generally stick with the AP, particularly in medium tanks anyway. You shouldn't be engaging heavily armoured tanks front on. You should be engaging them from the side or the rear. And while the map design does make that difficult in certain instances, just don't shoot heat out of tier 10 mediums. That's really the sort of be-all end-all of this discussion is do not shoot heat from tier 10 mediums, except if you're engaging a hull-down tier 10 tank destroyer that you cannot pen anywhere else. It's simple. And it's, like I've said before, the dividing line between a baddie with pretensions of being good and somebody who actually knows how to play medium tanks. You should not need it. You should not be using it. It actually increases your chances of bouncing at tier 10. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and as ever, I'll catch you on the next one.